I'm not saying that you'll never get audited. I mean, there are other audit triggers based on your billing, but I never want you to stress out about it. I
Yeah.
don't care if I ever get audited. I know I'll win. I'll win every single time I get, because I know exactly what I'm doing. And I know that everything I do is completely justified. And I know that this is going to sound arrogant, but I know that I know more about this than an auditor does.
Welcome, Genesis Nation listeners, watchers, viewers. Always excited to have one of our industry experts here. And I can see we both took care of our hair for this meeting. So I'm glad our stylists were taking care of that, right? This is an ongoing joke between Dr. Gregg Friedman and myself. And so I want to welcome you to Genesis Nation. For those of you who have not seen Dr. Gregg Friedman, I'm gonna admit myself, I'm hard to entertain, especially when it comes to documentation. And I was thoroughly entertained every time I see you present. So for those of you who have the opportunity to see Dr. Gregg, please go see him. He'll tell everybody where he's going to be coming up. Because I don't want to, who knows when this is going to post, but really, we're here to talk about bulletproof EMR. And this is something that you created. The best part, I love talking to chiropractors that are creating technology and also practicing at the same time. So you're still in practice. So you know what it's like to be on the front lines. So you've made the mistakes and you see people making the mistakes and you advise them. So tell us a little bit about the history of how you created Bulletproof.
So I'm in year 37 of practice right now, which just blows me away. And I still see patients. I see patients just a few hours a week, part-time. But I like to say I'm still in the game, because I want to get the same aggravation that everybody else gets, so that I can figure out what's going on and how do I get through it or around it. And then I can tell other doctors how to do that. So I've been at this a long time. And to be honest with you, I've been experimenting with documentation software since the 90s, when all these software programs were on floppy disks and the whole thing. I mean, I remember one of the ones that I started using was a program that there were forms that the doctor and the patient would fill out, the like Scantron forms,
Oh my
like for the
goodness.
standardized tests, and you
Yeah,
would
yeah,
fill in
yeah.
little bubbles and all that.
Yep.
And
And then
I'll never
run it
forget,
through the scanner,
run through a
right? Yeah.
scanner,
Yep. I had that.
and I'll never forget that I was kind of hanging out in my front office, and I was watching a new patient fill out the Scantron form in the waiting room for their first visit. And the person kept saying, "Oh, oh, I made a mistake. I need another form." And I kept thinking, "Oh my gosh, every one of these forms cost me like $1." And
Yeah.
I'm like, they went through like $10 worth. Oh, like, oh, you're killing me with
Were
this.
you handing out
So,
number two pencil? Were you handing out number two
oh,
pencil, the yellow
it
number
was
two pencils at
awful.
your front desk too?
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just, and
Yeah.
then we would scan the stuff, and then I would look at the finished product, and I'm like, this is horrible. I
Yeah.
cannot believe that this is actually. And then things evolved. And then one time, I used a program that was, the big feature was, oh, you could do this on your. Okay, this is going to age me a bit. Your Palm Pilot. Remember the Palm Pilot?
I do. It lasted for like 2 years, I think. I think I got one and then it was obsolete after like 2 years.
It was just,
Yeah.
nobody could see it.
Right.
It was just ridiculous. And then things progressed. And then, but back then I didn't really know anything about documentation, just like anybody else. Nobody knew what we were supposed to do. I mean, when I was in school, we learned about documentation, but if you ever asked the question, well, what exactly are we supposed to document? The only answer we were given, it was, well, soap. I'm like, okay, but what about that? And nobody really had a clear understanding and could really tell us exactly what they wanted. So I was like everybody else, we didn't know. And it wasn't until in the 90s when I had a personal injury case.
Mm.
And back in those days, PI was super easy. I mean, literally, we would do whatever we wanted to do. At the end of the PI case, we would send our bill to the insurance company or to the attorney, and then we got paid. Like the whole
That's it.
thing got paid.
Yeah.
They never asked to reduce our bill. We got paid. And they never asked for our documentation back then. It had nothing to do with that. And then one day, I was like, I get this letter in the mail from an insurance company, thinking there's going to be a check in there. So I excitedly, open the envelope, and I'm dumping it up, upside down, waiting for the check to fall out, and no check.
Yeah.
So it's a letter. I'm reading the letter, and it says, "Please send us your records for this." I'm like,
Records.
Records? What the hell are you talking about, records? So I called the adjuster and I said, what are you talking about, records? She goes, well, the stuff that you write down every visit. I said, uh, well, okay, but I mean, I wrote these and I don't know that I could read my own handwriting. I don't know that you're going to be able to read them. And she said, that's okay. Send it anyway. I said, well, what are you looking for? She said, we're looking to see if you established medical necessity. I'm like, what's that? No one had any idea what that was. And she said, I don't know. I said, well, if you don't know what it is, how are you going to know if I did it or not? And
Yeah.
she said, oh, I'll know it when I see it. I'm like, oh my God. And I thought, this is going to be terrible. If this is the beginning of a trend, we've got a problem. And I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about anybody else. I was thinking about me. I've got a problem.
Yeah.
So I decided to learn whatever I could about documentation. And I thought it would take me a couple of weeks. It took 3 years.
Wow.
At the end of 3 years, I looked at my notes and I kept thinking, what are we missing? What do we not know that everyone else in healthcare seems to know? At the end of 3 years, I looked at my notes and I thought, oh, I see what's going on. And that changed everything. And then I got deeper into it. And then I got certified as an IME doctor, reviewing doctor, and I started seeing all kinds of chiropractic records. And I'm thinking, oh boy, okay, we've got a problem here. We really do have a problem here. And it is so easily fixed. But my problem was whenever I tried going to these various software companies, they had no idea what I was talking about. They had
Hmm.
no idea what I was talking about. And I would bring up, well, according to this is a rule. Nothing. So basically, a lot of these software companies were just kind of giving us a platform to document the crap that we were usually documenting anyway, just making it legible. I'm like, okay,
Well,
that's
maybe a little bit easier
part of
with a
it.
click and a point here, but
Yeah,
still, it was
it was
not
still
quote unquote bulletproof.
it was just missing so much of the requirements that we're supposed to get. I'm like, okay. So I finally I just figured out, all right, screw it. I'm just going to do this myself. And I started backwards. I started with the end point. All right. I know the requirements. I know the rules. I know all the regulations. I know the different guidelines that may be thrown at us at any point, whether it's a state board, a malpractice thing, an insurance thing, PI, it doesn't matter. I knew all that. Let's start with that first and then build something around that. But it has to be done really quickly because I'm like everybody else. I don't want to spend any more time with this than anybody else does. I've got to
Yeah,
be able to do this really quickly, but it has to be exceptional. And that's kind of where I started with it.
love it. So I do want to dive into really that glaring moment that said, "Oh no, we have a problem." But before that, can you help me understand the difference between an EMR and an EHR? Because you are an
Yeah.
expert. I want to know.
Yeah. So an EMR is electronic medical record. That is defined simply as a digital version of the doctor's charts, notes. So if you document in a computer, that's EMR.
Okay.
EHR is different. EHR is much bigger. An EHR is electronic health record, and that was built to share information with the patients, all the other providers for the patient. So when EHR was first introduced, and it was introduced by CMS or Medicare years ago, the intent was so that doctors can communicate with each other, everyone involved in
Across.
patient
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
And that worked out. It worked out really well in hospitals because in a hospital, you've got, patients in there with multiple providers of different specialties. And then you've got all the doctors documenting in the same EHR so that
Yeah,
everybody
all
can
under
see
the
what's
same
going on.
server too. You're not
Exactly.
across the internet,
Right.
from town to town or state to state or country to country.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it was intended for. Well, then Medicare said, okay, so we want private practices to do this too. And doctors are like, what?
Yeah.
Because the problem is in a private practice, unless the doctor is using the same EHR as in the hospitals, the other, they're only communicating with the doctors in that practice. They're
Yeah.
not communicating with, and that became an issue. So even CMS has realized over the last few years, this really isn't working out as well as we had hoped. We
Yeah.
may need to find a different way to do this.
Right.
So that's the difference. So I figured there's plenty of software programs out there that can do, because a lot of doctors think that, well, I use an EHR. It's really more of an all-in-one program. it may not really fit the definition of EHR, but you figure you're doing your billing and your scheduling and your documentation all in one program. That's more of an all-in-one program as opposed to maybe by definition in EHR. So I figure there's plenty of those programs out there that do great. They do fine, some better than others. But the documentation piece, that was the weakest link. That was the
Got it.
problem. So
Well,
I
that's
just figured
so,
I'm going to
and,
fix
and
that part and then we'll deal with it.
and that's one spoke on the wheel,
Exactly.
so to speak, of an EHR. And for listeners, Genesis is a EHR. Bulletproof is an EMR that is within Genesis. That's so
Right.
we create clarity here, because many people have seen you out in the field lecturing or on a webinar lecturing, and they're like, I want Bulletproof EMR. And your suggestion is, yes, Bulletproof EMR is great for the documentation. And if you don't have a good EHR that it integrates with, then Genesis is the suggestion. I'm doing the soft sale for you.
Exactly.
It was just a hard sell, but everyone here is one of our clients anyway. I just want to create that distinction and clarity there for everybody. So there was that moment, excuse me, where you said, "Uh-oh, we got a problem." So, and I would guess that you're seeing these same things over and over, because I've talked to you and you tell me like, man, like chiropractors are at risk with their
Oh, yeah.
documentation. And I've seen you talk to all different states, and this cuts across all state. Certain things have certain guidelines, right? But in general, the Bulletproof EMR system really covers everything that you're going to need. So, high level, what are the biggest mistakes, or that profound moment that you said, "Oh, we got a problem"?
So I got certified by the American Board of Independent Medical Examiners back in like 2004. And as a result of that, I started getting requests from all over the country from insurance companies and even defense attorneys for insurance companies to review records and perform IMEs. And that's when I started reviewing lots and lots of chiropractic records. So, I mean, I've done thousands of these. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we really suck at this as a profession. I mean, we really do suck at this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, but again, and the reality is it's really easy to do it, but you have to know what the specific rules and regulations are. And whatever platform you're using also has to be aware of that. So here's one for sure. The assessment part of the SOAP note is the most overlooked part of the SOAP note. And that is where we can shine as chiropractors. Now, look, there's two things at play here. Number one, the doctor has to get good outcomes. Number two, the doctor has to show these good outcomes, right?
Got it.
Chiropractors are phenomenal at getting not good, but great outcomes. That's never been our problem. We get great outcomes. Our problem was most chiropractors have just no idea how to show it. How do we show these
I'm
outcomes?
going to even jump in and say we're lousy at documenting and showing it. At
Terrible.
least I'm going to speak for myself. I know I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, I could get referrals, but to document that
right.
on a note, I was lousy at it.
So in the assessment part of the SOAP note, there are certain requirements. Now, when I say requirements, the common question in everyone's mind is, well, who makes these requirements, Greg? Did you make these? No, I didn't make these up. I'm just the messenger. So who makes up the requirements? CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Now you're thinking, oh, well, that's Medicare. I don't do Medicare. No, don't think like that. CMS, they're the feds, right? They're the ones who create all the rules in healthcare for everyone. They create the standard for which everyone else follows. Even the state boards follow CMS. So if we just learn what they require from us and we follow that for every patient, even the cash paying patient, we're golden. We're absolutely golden.
Awesome.
So
That's
the
a
assessment,
nugget. That's a golden nugget right there, man. So like
yeah,
reading all the CMS guidelines in whatever, section of the country you live in, which they're going to be the same across all of those.
same,
That's
same.
critical. Awesome, man. Yeah.
So the assessment part of the SOAP note, there are certain requirements. And one of the big requirements, and this comes up in Medicare audits all the time, we are required to document on all subsequent visits how each condition that we're treating has responded since the previous visit. That one, as well as the second thing is we are required to document on every subsequent visit the treatment effectiveness. Those two things will crush 99.9% of all chiropractors out there.
So if I
Crush.
have a neck diagnosis, thoracic diagnosis, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, I have to notate on each one of those, each visit, how they responded, what treatments were done. Right? Did I catch that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Not just that they've improved, how they've improved. So
Okay.
the problem is chiropractors are like, oh my gosh, seriously. So think about it this way. So you would have to document today for those conditions, what you find, and then you've got to go back to the previous visit, see what you documented on that visit, compare that to today's visit, and then come back to today's visit and document the changes compared to last visit. Are you kidding me? No one's going to do that. I wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
So what CMS has actually been trying to do for years for us is they want us to document with certain specific metrics in mind. And when we document these, just a few, like 2 or 3 specific relevant metrics, we could use technology to literally do all that comparison for us
What's
without us
you got to
doing
tell
anything.
you? You're leaving me dangling in here, man. What are the what are the metrics? Is it VAS? Is it range of motion? Like what is it?
No. Okay. So according to CMS, there's 2 metrics that are required on every visit, and 1 metric is required on the first visit, and then every 30 days or sooner. So the 2 that are required on every visit are intensity of pain and frequency of pain, right? Intensity and frequency. So we've got to document intent, and I go through a whole thing in my lectures on intensity of pain, the 0 to 10 scale. Patients just suck at this, and we
Yeah.
suck at it also because
Yeah.
everything's a 10, and that's just ridiculous. So when I review records like on PI cases and everything's an 8, 9, and 10, I'm just rolling my eyes at people. But anyway, so intensity of pain. The other part though is frequency of pain, because the intensity of pain that could stay the same for a while, right? 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. But the frequency, that could change. So maybe it went from a 5 out of 10, 100% of the time, to a 5 out of 10, 90% of the time. Does that show
Okay.
improvement? Sure it does.
Yeah.
So one of the problem that we run into is a lot of the EHRs out there, they don't let you document those percentages. They make you document ranges: occasional, intermittent, frequent, and constant. Those ranges are 25 points broad. So it
Yeah.
could literally take a patient months to move from one category to the next. And what do your records look like for those months? Constant, 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 constant. And it's
Interesting.
not
Okay.
accurate. It's not accurate. So that's the first thing, the intensity of pain, frequency of pain for each condition. The third thing, which is only required on the first visit and then every 30 days or sooner, are functional outcome questionnaires.
Such as.
Not pain questionnaires, functional outcome questionnaires. So the most common ones that people will bring up is, oh, you mean like oswestry and the neck disability? Yes, but don't use those. And doctors like, why? I thought those are great for research, but trust me, they absolutely suck in clinical practice, because
Oh,
each of those, they're 10 questions each, 6 options per question. That's 60 options the patient has to read through, and they're not reading through them. It appears that the human brain shuts off after 24 questions. That's just my observation. So
I don't know
by
how we
the
made it through the SATs,
I,
but
by question number 4, the patient has already looked at 24 different options, and they're
wait,
like, I'm
yeah,
out.
it's overload. So you're saying
So
they're not practical. They like if it were they are a useful tool. They're just
for
not
research,
effectively practical for the private practice.
right? For research, they're fine, but for
Okay.
clinical practice to do every 30 days, we're getting bad data from it.
Mm.
So there are questionnaires that I love. Now, the visual analog scale kind of a thing, that's not a functional questionnaire. That's more of a pain thing. So that wouldn't count with this. But the ones there's a great one for headaches that I love. And everyone treats headaches. And this questionnaire is so responsive to what we do for some reason that it makes us look great. And it's the Headache Disability Index. It's 25 questions, but there's only 3 options per question: yes, sometimes, or no. I mean, and then every yes is worth 4 points. Every sometimes is worth 2 points. Every no is worth 0 points, and you add them up. It takes like seconds to do that. It's super easy. There's the Bournemouth Neck Questionnaire, 7 questions, 1 option each. The
Awesome.
Bournemouth Back Questionnaire, 7 questions, 1 option each. And I mean, some of these are, and then there's extremity stuff, and you want to do, if you're doing PI or sports and you're dealing with concussion patients, There's some good questionnaires for that. So but I tell doctors, you got to find the ones that are easy, the ones that are quick and easy for patients to complete. Do not overload them because number one, they're going to get pissed off at you. But number two, they're just going to zone out and you're not going to get
Yeah.
good data
And you
from
don't
them.
get accurate data. Yep.
So the intensity frequency, that's how we can see from visit to visit. All right, is treatment being effective or not?
Okay.
How did each condition change since the previous visit? The functional outcome questionnaire, that is more of an overall thing. All right,
Okay.
now we're going to document to begin with just the first trial of care. So we used to in the old days, we would document a plan of care. Oh, we're going to see the patient 3 times a week for 4 weeks and twice a week for 8 weeks and then once a week
Yep.
for a million weeks. All that. Those days are over, right? Now we're going to do this. We're going to document trial by trial by trial. And a trial of care is defined as the standard is a 30-day, 4-week trial or 12 visits, whichever comes first. 30-day, 4 weeks or 12 visits, whichever comes first. So that's our first trial of care. How do we know if at the end of that trial of care, if we're justified to do another trial of care, another 30-day, 4-week trial based on those functional outcome questionnaires? If we want to see at least 30% improvement on each of those questionnaires by the end of that first trial, and we would say, all right, now if it's close, it doesn't have to be at 30%, but if we're in that direction, all right, we're good. That'll justify another 30-day trial. And that we go 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. And that's how we
Love it.
do. And this is so easy to do. And this is
Well, actually,
exactly what
once you know it and you get the right education on it, like now I
yeah.
feel comfortable that I can actually do this. I'm going to put a cap on it here though, because really what I want our Genesis Nation listeners to, one, be able to find you. You give more webinars than anyone I've ever met. So this video will be part of us showing our users where they can actually get continuing ed credits. Because if you need, which you all do, need continuing ed credits, this is a valuable resource. It's not just like you're sitting there clicking buttons on your computer, right? Actually, if you zoned in and listened and focused on what you were saying, you're much less likely to get audited. You're much more likely to get paid. And this is all built in to our Genesis system. I know we could go on and on and on, and I want our listeners to find you on our webinars. So, and also you're at Parker Seminars. All the Parker seminars that are coming up, you're a consistent stage speaker. I didn't mean to just completely cut you off, but any final quick tips for our listeners?
Yeah. So for a lot of doctors, they're so intimidated by documentation and coding and all this. And I tell them, don't be. This is really, really a lot easier than we think. So don't be intimidated by it. Just learn the proper way to do it and have the right format available so that you can do it without thinking about it. I'm not saying that you'll never get audited. I mean, there are other audit triggers based on your billing, but I never want you to stress out about it. I
Yeah,
don't care if I ever get audited. I know I'll win. I'll win every single time I get because I know exactly what I'm doing. And I know that everything I do is completely justified. And I know that this is going to sound arrogant, but I know that I know more about this than an auditor does. So that's how I want everyone to have that mindset. So don't freak out about this. This is easily done. It can be done very, very quickly. I mean, it takes me an average of, for a subsequent visit, between 7 and 10 seconds to document a note exactly like this with my metrics, with calculations and all that. 7 to 10 seconds is all it takes for me to do
that's
that. This is
awesome.
easy, fast, and doctors, well, we got your back. I mean, this is easy to do.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Gregg Friedman. I am going to call you the documentation Sherpa. You will guide me up the
Was
mountain
it a hair? The
of
hair?
no. It was the robe that you took off before we presented. No, man. I mean, I'm serious because like I need handholding with this. As a practitioner, I wasn't paying attention to this enough, and I got nailed early on in practice, and I wish I'd found you earlier, but now I'm finding you here, and my job is really to disseminate your brain and information and passion to put this stuff out there in a good, entertaining way. So please check out Dr. Gregg when you're at Parker seminars all over the country, whenever they're on, as well as all the webinars that we'll be telling you about soon. So thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you as always.
My pleasure.